Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Culture Study Podcast. It's holiday season. I'm your host. You can call me PD. You're host of this podcast, host of the ever so successful YouTube channel, The Form of Therapy channel. That sounded weird. Again, very awkward doing these interviews kind of by myself, but I'm getting used to it. I'm getting the hang of it. And as we're nearing the holidays, it's Christmas this week, and by the time this podcast comes out, it's going to be a few days before Christmas. So I'm very excited. If you're listening to this, I do want to announce that I will be doing a Christmas Eve and a Christmas stream. So if you guys would like to participate in that, head on over to our Twitch. That's twitch.tv/formtherapy. I'm going to be doing a Christmas Eve stream at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and a Christmas stream probably on actually the morning of Christmas. So at 10 a.m. for that one. So 3 p.m. Christmas Eve and then 10 a.m. on Christmas Day. Those are Pacific Standard Time, California times. So if you are all over the world, if you're on the East Coast, if you're in Europe, Australia, Asia, wherever you are, if you want to tune in for the stream, make sure to follow us on Twitch. But I'm coming into this a little bit excited because it is the holiday season. Usually I have like a manic depressive sort of holiday season, but this season, I'm trying to, I guess, not trip into and fall into old habits. Trying to fight that seasonal depression. Not that it's easy, but it's an active effort, right? Because I've had my fair share of struggles this year, and I'm just trying to do better, trying to do right by both me, you guys. So yeah, just trying to get in the holiday mood. And by the way, somebody said on the podcast last week, did I just say the podcast? The podcast last week, somebody said in the comments, oh, the intro was like 20 minutes long, like, next time, like make the intro shorter or include a time code or whatever. It's a podcast. First of all, it doesn't matter how long the intro is. The intro is just, hey, welcome to the podcast, I'm PD, and that's it. That's the intro. Everything else, that's a part of the podcast content. There have also been people asking for timestamps and asking for chapters in the podcast. Like, that's not how podcasts work. You're supposed to listen to the whole thing from beginning to end. It's an audio journey. That's how the work is made. That's how it's presented to you. And that's how you're supposed to consume it. And asking for chapters in a podcast or asking to have a time code so people can skip the intro. I just want to say that's a little rude. And I say this not for myself. I say this as someone who's an avid listener of podcasts. I don't listen to other podcasts and then jump around through the podcast. I listen from beginning to end because they created this artwork and it's respectful. I'm just trying to be respectful to the people who worked on this podcast, to the people who either recorded it, the sound engineer, the host, the guests, whoever it is. So I'm not going to include time codes or timestamps or chapters or make short intros or whatever, because that's just not how a podcast works. And I understand that I think people are accustomed to a certain type of format or how I guess they consume my videos. I know that most of the people skip my intros on my videos. Most of the people don't even check out my reviews. And, I have evidence in the analytics of my videos to back that up. People literally skip ahead to the reaction part and then don't watch the rest of the video. And, those are 20-minute videos and people only watch like essentially 3 or 4 minutes of the reaction. And it does feel like a lot of my work going to waste, but for reaction videos, I understand, but that's just not how podcasts work. That's not a point of the podcast. I'm not here to, I don't know, scratch some kind of reaction itch someone might have. This is about the whole audio experience. So I just want to make that clear going forward. If anybody I don't know, brings that up again, just know that you're just supposed to sit back and listen and just enjoy the podcast. Turn it on whether you're on your way to work, on a drive. Some people say they do it while they're working. I don't know how that works. I guess if you do some kind of like an activity that's like something that you can kind of, I guess, kind of space out or like zero in and focus, like something as monotone as my voice might help you focus. So there's that. Some people say they do it while they're doing laundry or eating. So it's interesting how, I guess, people are variously consuming the podcast, but I appreciate everyone who is listening. Please don't take this as like a criticism or as like an angry retort. It's not. It's just kind of clarifying and being strong with my stance. Just because as a producer and as a creator, I've been doing this for man, like a decade now, and I see all the hard work that goes into any production. What you might think is a simple YouTube video, I see all the hard work and the efforts that go into it, whether it's the editing team, the producers, whoever, the talent. I see how much work goes into it, and I see how people don't appreciate that. People really take content for granted, really. Like, there's this whole criticism about overpaying actors and stuff like that. But as a director, I completely actually think that actors are appropriately paid. They may make tens of millions of dollars maybe for a movie, but I think it's appropriately paid. I see what actors go through on set. I see what they have to do to prepare. It's a unique talent, and you price based on that unique talent, but you're also like pricing for their lifestyle and their expense and the very unique lives that they have to live, especially once you're in the public eye. You're held to like a certain amount of scrutiny. So I just feel like a lot of work goes underappreciated. So it's one of the things that I have a very strong stance about, something that I'm just passionate about. So please don't take offense to what I'm saying. It's just me making my stance very clear. Before we get into today's podcast, I want to do something. It's not going to be a regular segment, but I want to have like a corner when I discover something and I'm really passionate about it and I really enjoy it. I want to share it with you guys. So we're calling this PDs Picks. PDs Picks. We have done like a variation of this on Patreon, but it's just something that I can't keep consistent because I don't always discover something new and that I'm really, really passionate about on a weekly basis. It happens once in a while. So this is going to be an irregular segment on the podcast. But PD's Picks. I have 3 suggestions for you guys, actually. It's what's been on replay. It's what I've been listening to on the regulars, because people do often ask me, hey, PD, what are you listening to these days? Well, let me tell you. First of all, this is not so much a recommendation, but this is what I am listening to these days, and I'm a little ashamed to admit it. Not ashamed because their music is bad in any way whatsoever, but just because the lyrics are so adulterous. But I don't know why. NCT U's Make-A-Wish, the birthday song, has become probably my most replayed NCT song of this entire year. And mind you, I listened to Kick It a lot. And yet somehow something about Make-A-Wish, I think it's that rolling synth, that bass, it's that whistling tune. It's just so addictive that something about it when it starts and then you've got like that bouncy sound. It's just so fun. And I've been really, really addicted to it. And I listen to the whole song too because I have like music ADD. Well, is it ADD or ADHD? attention deficit disorder. That might be ADD. Like I am really bad at just like staying interested in a song past the first chorus. Like it's no insult to the artist, but it's just something I have where like after the first chorus, I need to just move on to the next song, skip it. And I know like a handful of people also have this issue. And so that's how I am with most songs. But there are a few songs in, where I listen to it all the way through. And NCTU's Make a Wish is actually one of them because my favorite part is actually during the bridge when Taeyong goes 손을 막대, 손을 막대, 손을 막대, make a wish. I don't know why, but that part is like it's one of my favorite parts, if not my favorite part of that song. So that's what I'm listening to a lot. But I do have a Korean recommendation for you, although the lyrics are in English. It was a recently released collaboration between Ij and Keshi called Pillows. I highly suggest that you check it out. To my knowledge, it's not available on streaming platforms. It's only on YouTube. But that's Ij, Eaj, and Keshi, Keshi. That's Ij, aka Jay Park from Day 6. Jay, as some of you may know, some of you may not, he is the homie. We went to high school together, and I've been a supporter of his music ever since he debuted. And I feel like he's really starting to find his sound as a solo artist. And Pillows is, I think, the best thing he's put out ever. So I highly suggest everybody check that out. My other two suggestions are not K-pop songs, but it is what I'm listening to the most right now, and I really, really, really recommend it. One is called Chinatown by Bleachers. If you guys don't know, Bleachers is my favorite band of all time, and they put out two new singles called 45 and Chinatown, and I am obsessed with Chinatown. It's also featuring Bruce Springsteen, and if you just really like kind of like a slice of life, coming of age, 80s type of vibe, rock vibe, you will really, really like Chinatown. I highly suggest you guys check that out. If you guys do check it out and you enjoy it, let me know in the comments. Would love to hear what you guys think of the song. And then my last suggestion is actually Taylor Swift's Evermore album. That entire album is just fantastic. Taylor Swift, I think this year with, what was the other one called? Folklore. And Evermore, this year she has put out, in my opinion, her best works, but also her most forgettable works. Like for me, there's just something about folk music where, because the accompaniment, like the guitar accompaniment is so simple, it's like once you've heard one guitar folk song, you've heard them all, so instrumentally I don't find them like crazy interesting or even memorable, and especially like the top line and the melody, it's not written to be catchy like a K-pop song. So, I say it's her most forgettable music, but it's also her best music, because when you listen to it in the moment, because you have such an uninteresting instrumental background, I personally think that the lyrics and the message and the singing matter even more. And so I think her vocals are incredible on the Evermore album, and the lyrics are just so beautiful too, and they really speak to you. And so I highly suggest that. So, let's talk about some K-pop. Let's talk about the K-pop world. We have some questions here from our patrons, but I actually wanted to talk about a few things. One, Wendys Back, maybe Wendy from Red Velvet. So Wendy was spotted on the way back home with the other members of Red Velvet after something. People are speculating that it might be an SM online concert. It might be something else. But regardless, it looks like Wendy might be gearing up to make a comeback on the screen, make like a legit full-fledged comeback. Wendy has been largely out of the limelight. I think she's shown her face a couple times here and there throughout the year. But for those of you unaware, Wendy, almost exactly a year from this time right now. It was in December of 2019. Wendy injured herself really badly. I mean, they were major injuries during the rehearsals for the SBS Kyodaejeon 2019. She, I think she slipped, or she fell off. Well, first of all, she fell from a really big height because there were some safety measure issues at the SBS Kyodaejeon, and she wound up fracturing her face, part of her pelvis, and her wrist. And I was really worried at the time because here's the thing: fracturing your face and your wrist, those are major injuries, but you can heal from that. And the only thing that really worried me was actually her pelvis fracture, because you fracture your pelvis, that might be a career ender, especially for an idol who dances. Now, Red Velvet isn't doing like crazy complicated like flips and turns and like jumping in the air, but still they do a good healthy amount of dancing. And even if it's not super complex like knife cut choreo, just like the wear down and the fatigue of the actual physical exertion might be very strenuous on an injury like that. And honestly, it's actually really hard to recover from a pelvis fracture. The pelvis, it's not something that heals fucking easily. So I was really, really worried that, is this a career ender for Wendy? Now, not in terms of as a singer, because that doesn't affect her voice in any way, but I meant as like an idol performer. But, a lot of fans seem to be relieved because she looks healthy and happy. And so I do hope that she is back in tip-top shape, has had no issues. And I'm glad that she's healthy and safe too, because especially with an injury like that, she was in such a vulnerable state. COVID could have been really bad on her. COVID could have been really dangerous for somebody who already has a weakened immune system, who's already on the mend and on the repair. But it looks like they took all the right precautionary measures, and she looks good. We over here at Forma Therapy just want to congratulate Wendy on what seems to be a really healthy recovery, and we hope that she recovered with no additional, I guess, long-lasting issues. Because I've had life-threatening injuries. I've had major injuries that have permanently affected me. My back is permanently fucked up because of a car crash I had once. So yeah, I hope that there are no long lasting effects on her health and her body. And another thing, I'm gonna touch on this lightly because it's a very touchy subject, and I am not a drama channel, and this is not a drama podcast. This is not even a news channel, and it's not a news podcast either. We are here to just talk about cultural experiences and diving deep into the cultural context. And so this is a little bit of a dicey subject, and I'm sort of walking on eggshells here, but I'm going to touch on it quickly. Irun of B2B is being investigated for drug use. And now the headlines, oof, that sounds really serious, but it's for marijuana use. Marijuana used several times over the past 5 years, even as recent as last year. So I'm not gonna touch on Idun's case specifically, but I don't know if people know this, if many people know this. I'm sure those of you who were around for Top Scandal several years ago are at least aware of it. But marijuana use is incredibly illegal in Korea. Like, marijuana use it's borderline considered like almost high treason. Smoking marijuana, it's equivalent to like military evasion. Like, you guys know how bad it is to try and avoid military service in Korea, right? It is almost as like even worse than that. People who do marijuana are viewed as literally like the scum of society in Korea. And I personally don't agree with it. I think it's a backwards law. I think you can be personally against weed, but holding others to that same standard, I think, is ridiculous. Um, but I'm just bringing this up because I don't want to talk about it now, mainly because, again, this situation with Idun is, the investigation is still ongoing. But personally, whether Idun did it or not, apparently the police do have evidence that he did. Whether he did it or not, I am on Idun's side regardless, because I do not think marijuana is worth all that trouble, to be considered like this crazy amount of high treason, especially if you want to get into really, really fucked up laws in Korea, like the kind of messed up laws and the kind of things that Korea lets slide compared to like marijuana use, it's when you start to get into the hypocritical nature of Korean society. And so that, I think, that in and of itself is like a whole podcast on its own. So I'm just putting the question out there. If you guys want to hear me talk about and dive into the depth of the cultural context of marijuana use, let me know, and perhaps in the future we can make it an episode, after I feel like, once this whole investigation either wraps up or we get more information, because while I don't want to necessarily talk about Idun's investigation, I also don't want to put this out during a time where that might influence people's opinions about the investigation. So, we're going to let that pass. And we have plenty to talk about today as well. So today, I got some interesting questions from some of our patrons. And if you guys also want to ask questions, be sure to leave your questions in the comments of the YouTube video down below. Or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, you can go to the YouTube video, or better yet, if you want, priority with your questions as well, head on over to our Patreon. On our Patreon, we do occasionally ask for questions, and so the patrons will obviously get priority over anything else. So if you guys want to get priority questions, or if you just want to support me, the channel, or the podcast, well, patreon.com/formatherapy is the best way to do so. But we're going to start with this first question here. This is from, excuse my pronunciation of this. This is Erdna. They ask, what concepts do you want to be explored more or less? Example, I think there's way too much girl crush concepts. Okay, first of all, that second statement right there, I think there's way too much girl crush concepts. I both agree and don't agree. That's a tricky statement, because there was a time, and I think this was even as early and recent as 2-3 years ago, where girl crush concepts were not the norm. It really wasn't. And girl crush concepts failed. And girl crush concepts they've been trying to do successful girl crush concepts for a really long time in K-pop, all throughout the 2010s, and it has largely failed. Girl crush concepts have proven to not work for a really, really long time. And so, in fact, what we got a lot was either pop culture, like really, really pop heavy concepts, or really like very effeminate concepts. And very light, beautiful fairy tales type stuff, similar to like early G-Friend, early April music, stuff like that. Girl crush concepts have like gotten popular more so within the past few years. And you know what that is? The popularity of girl crush concepts actually doesn't even come from anything specific in Korea. It's actually because of you guys. You see, girl crush concepts largely do not work in Korea, and it is proven to largely not work in Korea. Some of the most popular girl groups in Korea are not girl crush heavy groups. In fact, girl crush heavy groups are largely only popular in the US, or at least internationally, overseas. And so the rise of girl crush concepts is not because girl crush is suddenly popular. It's because girl crush groups have been able to survive and sustain a living and a career because international fans are supporting it now, and the international fan base is stronger and have been able to support that. Previously, that was not the case, and so I would say it's more so because of you guys. So first of all, congratulations. I truly believe you guys are the reason why there are more girl crush concepts. And is there too many? I think yes, we are in a position where there is an oversaturation. There is a slight oversaturation of girl crush concepts. At the same time, I don't want to make it seem like other girl group concepts don't exist. There are plenty of other girl what's the other word? What's the opposite of girl crush? But whatever the opposite of girl crush is, other girl group concepts. I think there's plenty still out there. Like if girl crush is not your thing, there are other avenues where you can look. You've got G Friend, you've got Elris, you've got Luna. Well, I guess Luna more so has done some girl crush stuff as of recently. But yeah, I feel like, you know, there are a handful of girl groups who aren't doing girl crush concepts that you can enjoy. But yes, I do think there is an oversaturation of girl crush concepts, and there's not enough of groups like, I would say, something like Elris and stuff like that. But also groups like that, the problem is when you have a group that doesn't debut with a girl crush concept, they do not perform well. They do not do well. Why? Because Korea largely, you know, does not support idol groups anymore, and they're living off of international fan bases, and international fan bases don't like non girl crush concepts. You know, we're going through a very big phase, and so it's more so just answering to the market. What concepts do I want to see more? I just want to see more pop music. I do. I want to see like actual pure pop, you know. Girl Crush is great. Like Secret Numbers, most recent comeback was incredible, so powerful. I loved it. But I feel like I'm missing stuff like Barry Good's most recent comeback with Akio, as it's called in Korean, or the Korean title actually is 함께 떠나요. That song, by the way, that's a suggestion for you guys. If you guys want to hear like some really, really great classic girl group K-pop, ACCIO, ACCIO by Berry Good, BERRYGOOD. Incredible song. But yeah, I would like to see more concepts like that. It's been a long time, and seeing how the song is not performing that well, it also does speak to the style and the lack of popularity in that style. But I like really sweet, feel-good girl group K-pop. Stuff like ACCIO by Barry Good, Will You Go Out With Me by Daya, Wii U by Pristin. Like, I love just pure pop. I am a sucker for pure pop. Okay, next, and by the way, we are also going to talk about the Korean scene not largely supporting idol groups in K-pop. That's not to say there is no Korean fan base. Of course, the Korean fan base is huge in Korea, and it is still more important than the international fan bases, because they are the ones that still hold the most power. But it's just not the same as what it used to be. And we have an audience question that will dive into that in just a moment. But let me answer this next question. This is actually not a K-pop question. This is from Ravi. They ask, leaving the K-pop topic aside, what is your favorite movie genre? And also, what is your favorite movie / actor? Since you are a director and a producer, I'm really curious. So, first of all, thank you for the question. I appreciate non-K-pop questions as well. I like sharing stuff about my personal life and my personal interests. What is my favorite movie genre? I really like slice of life stuff. I like movies that are about life. I like movies that are about love. I like romance movies. I like really romantic movies as well. I'm not talking about rom-coms. I'm talking about romance. Um, and I really like movies that I guess make you think. Movies that are a little bit elevated. Um, and in terms of what are my favorite movies, I would say my favorite movies like of all time that like kind of go down in like history of like, oh, these are some of my favorite movies. First of all, there's About Time, starring Rachel McAdams and Donald Gleason. I think that will always be my favorite movie of all time. It is incredible. I highly suggest you guys check it out. It is a rom com, but it's less calm and it's more rom, and it is one of the most thoughtful and most emotional movies I've ever seen. And it just, at the end of the movie, it just made me feel so much. So that's a really good movie. Love Exposure. Love Exposure is man, it is a 4 hour long endeavor. It is a Japanese film, and it is one of the wildest films I have ever seen. And it was introduced to me by Kevin from React to the K. Kevin is a huge movie buff, and he said it was his favorite movie of all time. And if you know Kevin and if you know how he consumes movies, I thought, wow, that's high praise. And so, I finally did see it. I actually saw it with him in like a sort of like a theater setting with some of his movie club friends when I went to go visit React to the K. And it was, well, first of all, let me describe the plot. It's 4 hours, and it's about a son of a Catholic priest who, after the death of his mother, the Catholic priest is sort of like he becomes negligent of his son. And so he wants his dad's attention, and so the only way he can get his dad's attention is to go to confessional, except his dad always scolds him. Like it's a weird twisted thing where his dad scolds him for not having anything to confess in confessional. He's like, what have you got to confess? And the boy, he's like this sweet little kind of shy boy, and he's like, I don't know, I didn't do anything wrong this week. And so he's like, you must think, you must think. And so the boy, he, in order to get closer to his father, he goes out and looks for ways to sin so that he can confess, so that he can have things to confess to his father in confessional. And it's really weird. And he takes up with like this hooligan street gang, and they do all this like dumb shit, and some of the stuff involves like vandalism, stuff like that. And then even as weird as, and this sounds very Japanese, but the art of underskirt panty shot ninjutsu, which you might be like, what did you just say, PD? And I'm like, yeah, it's weird. And yet, after the 4 hour endeavor that is that movie, when that movie ended, I was left speechless. That whole movie took my breath away. It was a movie that went all over the place, and it was this wild, honestly arduous journey, and it becomes a bloodbath by the end, which you're like, what? How does that happen? And it's like, yo, it gets weird. Like, he becomes a swordsman vigilante. It's crazy. It's a Japanese movie, but like it's crazy even for a Japanese movie. And by the end, I was just so speechless. But like it's a movie that is about life and it is about love, and it touched me in a way that like no other movie has ever done. And I shed like literally like a single tear when that movie finished, because it was such a work of art, you know? So yeah, that's a weird movie. Then a movie called Columbus, starring John Cho. Highly encourage that if you're into visually driven movies. Very beautiful movie. And then probably the last movie I would say is one of my favorites is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It is I can't remember what country. I think it's a French film. It's either French, Italian, Spanish. It's European. I'm sorry. I'm an ignorant American. So like a lot of the European countries kind of just blend for me. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was French. But it is a beautiful film. It's called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It is an intensely queer film, very, very queer, but very, very beautiful. It's a movie about art, emotion, and it's a movie where in the middle of watching it, you can feel that this movie is going to change your life. And it did. It really the movie changed my life. And when that movie also ended, I just sat there kind of just like so shaken. And like I just started crying because not because the movie was sad, but like that's how visceral that movie is, and especially that ending. Like it just fills you with so much emotion. You've got to see Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It's incredible. And then going off that second half of the question, what is your favorite movie / actor? In terms of actors, I really like, first of all, my number one go-to is always Chris Evans. Chris Evans is not, I wouldn't say like he's like the greatest actor in the world, right? He's not the most versatile actor. I feel like Chris Evans really kind of only plays one role, but like he does it really well. Like I will watch any movie Chris Evans is in. Like I don't care what the movie is. If you tell me Chris Evans is in it, I will watch it. Same with Anthony Mackie. I think Anthony Mackie is incredibly charismatic and really, really good, and he can play both serious and comedic roles so well. I think Anthony Mackie actually has more range than Chris Evans does. I also really like Haley Lou Richardson. Haley Lou Richardson starred opposite of John Cho in Columbus, which I mentioned earlier, and Mahershala Ali is one of my favorite actors of all time. Mahershala Ali is so suave, and his line delivery is incredible. And Mahershala Ali, the way he acts, just, oh my God, his facial expressions are so good. So yeah, that's it for my favorite movies / actors. I knew I'd get that question eventually, and so when I saw it, I was like, yeah, we'll get it out of the way because I don't want people to repeat the same question in the future. But those are some of my favorite movies and some of my favorite actors, at least the ones that come into my mind at the top of my head. Okay, so here is the last question from Opinionated Matt. And we're only doing 3 questions today because this last question I am sort of surmising is actually going to take up a good chunk of the podcast because it's a really, really deep question and it really requires a lot of context. Okay, so this is a really long question, so I'm going to read the whole thing and then we're going to break it down into parts afterwards, okay? All right, here we go. What is the real music scene in Korea? By that I mean, what kind of music do Koreans perceive as cool? Really, because I just found fragments of it and it's kind of strange. It's kind of strange seen from here. I've heard that men mostly know about girl groups when they are in the military, that Koreans think K-pop is childish or something that just focuses on young people, that the real music for them is more about indie / singer-songwriter and hip-hop, maybe even trad. I wonder how it came to be such a sought-after career for kids if it's considered almost a gimmick by adults. Not to mention the hard work all idols had to put in to become one. How does that add up? Okay, so it's a very long question with a lot of explanations and a lot of context and perception. I think perhaps because we are closely tied to K-pop, because you are a fan of K-pop, and I'm sure this is the thing a lot of K-pop fans wonder as well. Why is idol culture and idol music looked down upon in Korea. Um, and this last word or this last sentence from Matt, they say, how does that add up? Well, actually, I think it adds up pretty easily and pretty well. So let me try to put it into a different spin and a different perception that'll perhaps help people understand. But let's backtrack a little. So the question, what is the real music scene in Korea? They mention, I've heard that men mostly know about girl groups when they are in the military. So even though I'm Korean and I was born in Korea, I did not serve in the Korean military. I got my American citizenship when I was a teenager. So I never served, and so I can't give you a full answer on this. But from what I know and from my understanding, part of it is because you're surrounded by dudes all the time, and so a big culture in the army and a shared bonding experience is a lot of the guys kind of just watching K-pop girl group music videos, and it's like their only exposure to women, and so like they become fans of a lot of girl groups during that time. Especially because idol culture has that kind of servitude, sort of serving their audience, serving their fans type of culture, and so it does feel like someone is catering and caring about the feelings of like the guys stuck in this shitty situation in the military. So that's sort of my understanding behind that. But moving on to this part, that Koreans think K-pop is childish or something that just focuses on young people, which I mean, it does focus on young people. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. It's in the way of like, yeah, K-pop idol music largely targets young people. Mind you, there are a lot of K-pop fans that are older than 20, older than 30, 40, 50. Heck, I've seen comments from people saying like, I'm in my 60s and I'm listening to K-pop, and that's great. But yeah, pop culture in general largely targets a younger audience. That's not necessarily designated only to K-pop. If you actually look at the pop world in general, you're going to see most Ariana Grande fans are younger. Most Harry Styles fans are younger. Pop culture is just, generally largely marketed towards young people. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be young to appreciate it, but that's always how pop culture works. Let's see. Where were we? I'm looking at the sentence. All right. Here we go. That the real music for them is more about indie / singer - songwriter and hip hop, maybe even trot, ... Okay, so the question of what is the real music scene in Korea? There is no one answer to that question because you're asking the wrong question. Because the quote unquote scene in Korea is it's not one sect of people. It's not one group of people. You're trying to generalize it, and that's fine. But you have to understand, Korea is, what are you asking? Because Korea is not just people in their 20s. There are people, obviously under 10 years old. There are people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And the music is going to change based on the age range. It doesn't have to do, it's not based on just the nationality of being Korean. Just because you're Korean doesn't mean you're all going to be into this type of music. It's based on the age range. For example, people who are largely in the older range in Korea, yeah, they largely like ballads and they largely like trot music, especially the older audience. But that's not to say there isn't a younger appreciation for trot, but that's how it's generally going to skew. Ballads and trot music for older folks. Now, people in the, I would say, 20s to early 40s range, that's when it becomes a little bit more up in the air. So, trot is a part of that, but a big part, especially with the youth culture, is yes, indie singer-songwriter, indie bands are very big. Band culture is very big, and hip hop as well. And so, that's not the only thing. It's also American music. In fact, American music is bigger in Korea than some Korean music is. First of all, I can tell you for sure, American music at times, certain American songs are bigger than It's bigger than K-pop itself in Korea, because Koreans definitely have a fascination, and like what do they perceive as cool is American stuff. They think, oh, American Hollywood blockbusters are so cool. Like for example, what we think is like a shallow like American movie, like, oh, this is like just some like boring dumb action movie. In Korea, the way it's marketed to Koreans, it's like, oh, it's a really cool American foreign action flick, you know? And even if there's a lack of story and substance, just the fact that it was produced in America and by Hollywood, there is this sort of kind of, they're a little bit mystified by that foreign culture, in the same way, like, you might be like, okay, here's an example. K-pop fans, some K-pop fans, a handful of K-pop fans like trot music. I don't like trot music. And people ask, why don't you like trot music? What? Well, that's crazy. What? I'm like, no, you're crazy for liking trot music. And to phrase it, to I guess frame it, like, trot music is the country music of Korea. It's shallow. The lyrics are repetitive, and they sing about really dumb stuff. And it's like country music. It's that the sort of like stereotype that country music has in America, which I don't think country music in America is as shit as people, kind of perceive it to be. But there is that grinder shit where they sing about very shallow things, right? In country music, there is that kind of country music. That's how trot music is. And I feel like a handful of K-pop fans only like trot music because, and they don't see that trot music as stupid because it's foreign, because it's interesting, because it's different, and you don't understand the cultural context of this is actually really, really stupid. And so that's kind of the way it is with like American movies there. We might think a movie is, and that's actually like a lot of American movies overall. We, as an American audience, we might think, oh, this movie is stupid, it's boring, it's a boring blockbuster, it's shallow, it's got no depth. It'll score like 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. It will be like one of the highest grossing movies in Korea, China, like crazy. Because in Asia, it's not just Korea. In Asia, there is a sort of mystified glamour that they see with Hollywood, and it's the same way that we kind of view Hallyu actors as well, and Hallyu movies. So what's big in Korea is actually a lot of American pop artists. Ariana Grande is really popular in Korea. Stuff like not just American stuff, even Adele, Dua Lipa, Khalid, Post Malone. I know Post Malone is really popular in Korea. Just overall, the American radio station music that you don't enjoy. Like, I mean, maybe you do, but like, I know like there are people that are like me that just like find American pop music to be bland and boring. That's actually what Koreans are into. And Koreans are into a lot of American pop music, and they're into largely R&B and indie music. And so what that stems from, because this isn't backed by any sort of evidence. This is sort of actually more so just my perceiving. If you look at the three biggest, if we're taking American pop music out of this, if you look at the three biggest types of music in Korea, it's indie music, like indie bands, hip hop music, and R&B. People don't talk about R&B enough. R&B is huge in Korea. People like Crush or whoever. So those three are like really, really big. And ballads I'll throw in there as well. And a reason for that is people want to hear, I think the best way is truth to power, the soul. Indie music is very intimate. R&B music, very intimate. Ballad music, very intimate. Koreans are, it's not just about singer-songwriter type music. It's even hip hop. Hip hop isn't necessarily intimate, but hip hop, when they're rapping in Korean hip hop music, the lyrics, yes, there are some douchey songs here and there, but a lot of Korean hip hop music is actually truth to power. A lot of Korean hip hop music is, they have something to say, they have a message, or they have like a story to tell, they have emotions that they're trying to get off their chest. Korean hip hop music is actually closer to the grassroots of where hip hop originally started from, being a vehicle for a message, a poem, rather than what hip hop and rap music has sort of turned into in the American pop scene, with stuff like, I mean, even J Park's Soju or Lil Pump, or people rapping about wanting to do drugs and partying and bitches and hoes and dollar bills and that kind of stuff. Um, Koreans are Koreans don't want something that's shallow. Koreans want lyrics and music that is emotional and captivate you. And idol music, the lyrics are largely shallow, and we can act like it's not, but it's cookie cutter. It's very cookie cutter. It's not often that idol music has a lot of truth and power behind the lyrics, especially because a lot of their lyrics are not written by the idols themselves. The lyrics are written by somebody else on, their staff. And someone's gonna be like, oh, but BTS wrote these lyrics, Twice wrote these lyrics, etc., etc. Yes. All right. First of all, yes, BTS has written their own lyrics before. Twice has written their own lyrics before. 17 has written their own lyrics before. This group, that group has written their own lyrics before. Yes, that happens. But we are going off the big, large generalization, and it's why BTS is so special. It's why 17 is so special. It's why when, Twice wrote their own lyrics, it was such a big deal, because in large part, in the large sphere of things, idols do not write their own lyrics. That is why it makes it so special. So before you, butt in and go, but blah, blah, blah wrote the lyrics. Yes, but that is why blah, blah, blah is special, because in large part, in the whole scene, people do not write their own lyrics. And so it also has to do with, I feel like, that kind of the lyrics aren't very truthful, and they're not, going back to that whole military thing of like, there's also this servitude. Idols are serving the general public, rather than speaking about their own like personal issues, speaking about their own experiences, speaking about the emotions coming from them. Like it, basically it's not artsy fartsy enough. They look down on idols, and in the Korean scene, even amongst Korean musicians, I think the stigma has died down less, but Korean musicians, like actual like Korean solo artists and stuff, used to call idols not real singers. They called them not real musicians, because they were not singing like the truth. And just think about idol lyrics for a second. Like, even a Twice written lyric, like Love Foolish or whatever, the things that they're singing about, they wrote lyrics for like a fun pop song, but like pop songs, especially like fun pop songs, the lyrics are it's not really singing about anything, It's singing about like, oh, I'm gonna get you, boy, or I'm gonna get you, girl, or like even if an idol member wrote the lyrics, it's like, okay, you wrote the lyrics, but what did they really write about? And it's like the songs are just usually like, oh, I'm so hot, or like blah blah blah. Like I should have like pulled up with like actual lyric examples, but that's why, rather than like telling a beautiful story And that's actually like one of the things about K-pop that I think I view as a criticism, is that K-pop music, especially K-pop lyrics, like stories have largely disappeared. They are no longer telling a story. They are, I feel like, focusing on making the beat first and then just tossing lyrics on top of, I don't know, like an interesting beat or an interesting instrumental. It's a problem that's developed in K-pop, I think, over the past decade. Once you've gotten like more crazy complex with instrumentals, like I was talking about with Taylor Swift's album, the more simple of an instrumental you have, the more focus you put on lyrics and what the message of those lyrics are and what that means. And so, I want to point out, like, okay, I'm thinking of like a very specific idol song that has a story or means something, right? Winner's Solo. I'm sorry, not Winner's Solo. Winner's Fool. I was a fool. That song. Winner's Fool tells a story. It comes from the heart, and it's why it was so popular. But then on the flip side, Winner's Love Me, or Winner's Island, or what was the every day, every day, that song, like with you, what is that really singing about, right? It and please don't take it out on me when I'm saying these things. I'm more so speaking from the Korean context and the way Koreans view things. And then, look at like some girl group music, like I don't know, Momoland's Dan Kun Kwang. It's just like a flurry of cutesy buzzwords, and same with other male groups as well. I think that's the best way to, like, kind of describe it. It's like idol music has like largely been just like the lyrics are just largely buzzwords. They're not really saying anything. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna get you. Like, yeah, whatever. It's like largely buzzwords that don't really, like, the song doesn't really have any substance or meaning. It's an earworm. And guys, don't get me wrong. You have to understand, that's fine. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with just like a shallow pop song? Because at the end of the day, it's a pop song. That's what pop songs are. That's what K-pop is. A pop song doesn't need to have like a deep hidden meaning. Like, listen, like my favorite idol group is 17, right? You know, let's take a song like Mante. I love Mante. I do, but Mante, it's just a pop song. It's a pop song. It's talking about just seeing a girl and wanting to shout hooray, right? It's different. And it's why, like, and it's why, RM once talked about this as well. K-pop title tracks are written in a very different way. It's written in a very, very different way. It's structured in a different way, because it's meant to be just kind of like shallow and catchy. And where K-pop groups shine, where the artists shine, are their B-sides. And so largely, I feel like, especially groups like BTS, or a group like 17, they shine with their B-sides because usually members take deeper participation in the actual instrumental or writing the lyrics. And when they do that, you get a much more intimate song. And, that's why a lot of K-pop fans, if you guys think about it, that's why when you listen to like an album or an EP, your favorite song might not be the title track. In fact, for me, 99% of the time, my favorite song on an EP or an album is never the title track. It's always the B-side. And usually the title track becomes like, maybe not my least favorite thing on the album, but like second to last or whatever. Like, always the B-sides are better. And it's because the B-sides are treated more like works of art rather than industry commercial work. Because at the end of the day, we have to admit, K-pop music is just, it's super commercial. It's super commercial. We are being fed something by the industry machine. They're like, when they write these songs, the K-pop company is like, "Ooh, yeah, this will be catchy. This will get them people on the hooks and stuff like that." They're writing that specifically to be shallow. So I feel like idols aren't really respected because of that reason, because idols are like essentially just dolls or puppets where, yes, they work really hard, they train hard and whatnot, but then the voice, what they're singing about, that's not their voice. Those aren't their thoughts. You know what I mean? They're not conveying their thoughts, and they're not conveying someone else's thoughts either. They're conveying carefully articulated buzzwords created by a writer that somebody else wrote, thinking like, "Oh, this is gonna be catchy." You know what I mean? So it's because K-pop music is shallow, and here's the thing: I think that's completely fine. You can enjoy shallow music. There's nothing wrong with that. Taylor Swift has put out shallow music before, and hell, I fucking love it. Um, that's just how pop music works. Um, you have to think about it like this: in terms of like the American music scene, pop culture in America, people shit talk pop culture all the time. People will, shit talk Ariana Grande Seven Rings all the time. No matter how big it is, people will still shit talk it, because pop music, just like, it's like, oh, it's whatever. It's drivel, it's derivative. And that's how it always feels and seems. It seems so ridiculous to us because idols work harder, and I'm gonna say it, and because there is I have talked to songwriters. I have talked to songwriters who have worked with Miley Cyrus, who've worked with like Ariana Grande, and then have worked on the flip side on the Korean scene, and they talk about how they are just floored and stunned. Like, specifically, I've talked to a producer who he worked with Miley Cyrus and some other people, and he said that after going to Korea and seeing how these idols work, he said that American musicians, in comparison, are straight up lazy. He was like, yeah, I'm not holding back. Like, American artists are straight up lazy, and idols are severely underpaid too. And American musicians get paid way more, and we got into a whole discussion about that. But idols do work harder, yeah, but they do work harder, and we as K-pop fans feel like it's unjust because they work so hard. They dance, they're training till 4 a.m, dancing their asses off, doing all these crazy moves and shit. But at the end of the day, it's still the pop scene. It's still pop music. I think what it is that with Koreans as well, what we are having trouble with being outside of the Korean context is like, oh yeah, but we see this all the time. It's derivative. To them, it's derivative. To us, because we've never seen it before, because in our culture we don't get deep into crazy training and performances like this. We value and see the value in the performance and the dancing way more than Korea does. So I would say, in large part, people don't give idols credit just because it's pop music. That's what it is. Just because it's pop music. But you and I know better, right? You and I know, hey, the title track may be shallow, but there are some B-sides that are just so moving and so emotional. But here's the thing: they don't promote those B-sides. That's why. There's a song by 17, I Don't Know. Oh my God. It's beautiful. It's both catchy and emotional and beautiful. The End by GOT7, it touches my heart listening to that song. B-sides are where it's at. And really, this whole conversation has just been a large justification for basically it's because B-sides are better, and B-sides are real. I don't want to say real music. Let me rephrase that. I think what it is Koreans largely don't view title tracks as art, or it's not artistic enough. They view it as shallow. And I'm going to side with them on that. It is largely commercial. It is largely factory made. Title tracks are the most factory made things you are going to get, okay? It's just that's how it is. And again, someone might be like, "Oh, but what about this group's this title track, this group's this title track?" I'm not coming for your specific group and that specific title track. I am talking about the industry as a whole, the generalization as a whole, and how that works out. And really, it's B-sides where artists, I feel like, get to really spread their wings and flex and kind of show off their artistry. And you know, I know it can get frustrating knowing that the Korean scene doesn't, really get deep into it like that, but as long as you know, and as long as I know, hey, I think that's all that matters. As long as we know, right? As long as we know how hard they work, as long as we know how good their music actually is. And I think we all sort of, as K-pop fans, whether we admit it out loud or not, we accept the title tracks for how they are because we know that it's just marketing. It's just marketing. And that's why, and I'm going to tell you this, it's why so many small K-pop groups fail, because like these small K-pop companies actually don't understand that. They don't understand that B-sides are more important. You can't get away with just a really good title track and a really good title track K-pop song. And it's why just releasing only single after single is not going to work for your group. That's not how you build a fan base. That's not how you get loyalty. You use the title track to lure people in, to catch their attention, and then the B-side, you have to focus on the B-side actually harder than you focus on the title track, in my opinion. Because yes, you may have brought them in with the title track, but if your B-sides can't show off that your group is special and different somehow, you're not going to survive. Anyways, that is it for my little piece on why the K-pop idol music scene is not taken so seriously in Korea. As always, the culture study is about discussion and providing a back and forth. So I would love to know, what do you guys think about this subject? What do you guys think about everything I said about how idol music is treated? Like I said, I think really what it is, what it comes down to is we just lack the perspective of living in Korea and being Korean. For Koreans, this is just derivative mainstream culture music. Okay? Like in the same way that like we like K-pop music and a handful of us don't like the mainstream American pop music, that's the same for them as well. Because in mainstream American pop, I'm sure they work hard, and we are disrespecting their hard work when we say we don't like this person's music or that person's music. I'm sure they work hard, not as hard as idols, but I'm sure they work hard as well. And I'm sure there are Koreans who are like, why don't Americans like American music? And it's just always going to be, I think we're always going to sort of, a handful of us might be a bunch of edgelords. I certainly am, and I don't like mainstream stuff ever. And I think that's just the same case with a lot of Koreans. But, let me know what you guys think about that. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know where you guys stand. First of all, let me know whether you're American, whether you're from this country or that country, and what you guys think. Because I do think that, like, being from a different country provides you with a different perspective. I think if you are American, you might have a different perspective on American pop music than somebody who doesn't live in America. So let me know what you guys think. And, be sure to let me know in the comments if there is anything else you want me to talk about in the future. Like I said, perhaps diving deeper into the whole marijuana issue in Korea is something we can do in a future podcast. Maybe we'll have someone who actually lives in Korea guest on the podcast that they can weigh in on this conversation. But yeah, I loved talking to you guys this week. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the podcast. Guys, if you really want to support the show, we would really, really greatly appreciate if you checked us out and subscribed to us on either Apple or Spotify Music. Or sorry, not Apple Music and Spotify Music, but Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. On Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review if you can. We would really, really, really greatly appreciate it. We don't necessarily make money doing the podcast or the YouTube channel as a whole. So if you guys also do want to support us, consider visiting us at patreon.com/formatherapy. For as little as $2 a month, you can support us. You can do a little bit more. We have live stage variety show, drama reactions for just a little bit more. We really, really would appreciate the support, guys. Thank you, everyone who has listened to this podcast, who has supported this podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll check back in next week. I'll see you guys later. Bye.